All right, welcome to another micro lecture in module 2 of programming in C#. We're going to speak about Booleans, characters, and enumerations as data types in this micro lecture. So let's get started. So what's a Boolean? A Boolean is a straightforward value of true or false. It basically means 1 or 0, on or off. It's the specific value that you'll see at the lowest common denominator of any computer. Whereas, looking at a lot of things computationally, we think of computers as being extremely complex, but they're not. As a matter of fact, they're very simple. Basically, what a CPU does is it determines whether something is true or false. And based on that true or false value, it turns on or turns off the transistors on the motherboard and or the processor. It's very, very simple. It just does it so quickly, we don't even realize that it's actually happening in real time. So, as I said, a Boolean value is true or false. So theoretically speaking, and literally speaking, it can only hold two values, true or false. And if you want to declare a Boolean variable, you must do it with the data type bool. One way to get the value of a Boolean data type, or to get the value into a Boolean, is to compare two items or to compare two objects, two variables, and ask the question, do they equal? Remember what I said in earlier micro lectures, one equal sign means equality. I'm sorry, one equal sign means assignment. Two equal signs means equality. And whatever the outcome of that expression is, it is presented at that moment in time at the place the expression is calculated and executed. Some comparison operators are as follows. We can do greater than, less than. Remember in elementary school, if the alligator eats the number, then it's greater than, and vice versa. There's equals. Remember, I said two equal signs means equality. You can see here in the third box, two equal signs here. It is determining or asking the question, do the two values, one on the left and one on the right, do they equal each other? Are they equal? This is an interesting conundrum because certain data types don't equal each other even if they're the same. It's very interesting. Less than or equal to is basically less than with an equal sign. Greater than or equal to is the inverse. And then not equal to, which is bang, or exclamation point. We don't say exclamation point. We say bang, equal sign. All right. So now that we've spoken in some way, shape, form, or fashion about Boolean, I can't help but touch back on what the char data type does. And I want to talk about it kind of in a deeper context. So the char data type, the variable which is of char data type, can only hold one character. And it holds that character within the form of Unicode. Chars are by default constants, just like strings are by default immutable. Now, the thing about chars that make them constants is that chars cannot really change. The symbolic nature of the char relates itself to a base 16 hexadecimal value on the back end. And as such, it will always equal that hexadecimal value no matter what you do. Now, granted, you could theoretically create your own hexadecimal base 16 library. There's many others out there. Latin, Unicode is the one we use constantly, and so on and so forth. But in the end, it makes the most sense to use Unicode because that is what we use on our keyboards when we use them in our mice. And without that specific hexadecimal non-proprietary IEEE standard being employed, you can have a situation where individuals cannot use your program and or computer, given the fact that their input device, their keyboard, does not correspond to the Unicode characters that you are using. Therefore, characters are by proxy constants and cannot be changed. Now, you can change chars. I'm not saying that a char data type is a constant, but the primitive data type char is. It's a bit of a conundrum. Either way, if I wanted to escape or have an escape sequence, I would put a pair of characters next to each other. Now, how would I do that if I can only hold one character in a char variable? Well, you'd have two char variables. Another way you can escape a char is by using backspace. And you might have seen this in the past with specific character implementations that do things. They are not necessarily a symbol we want represented on the screen. One such sequence is \n or \r. \n means new line. \r means return. They're kind of the same thing, but they're not. Return means I hit the enter key. New line literally means break. Kind of. \b means break, but that's not the point. The point is that those specific character implementations or escape sequences will not show up when we print something, because those specific character sequences are not printable due to the fact that they are escaped by a \. And because they are escaped by a \, and we understand, the program understands that if it's \n, \r, \t, \b, those are actions that it needs to take. Now, please understand that \r is also the hexadecimal version in alphanumeric form of the return key. So theoretically, you're clicking the return key in the string when you add those characters. So characters used in C# are represented in Unicode. That is the hexadecimal library that we use to correspond to the keyboards and mice that we use for our human-computer interaction. There are two ways to store a character. The first way is just putting one symbol in, and the second way is using \ as an escape sequence and theoretically using the hexadecimal value or form of the letter or the number or the input rather than the actual human understood alphanumeric symbol that we use in everyday language. And lastly, I want to talk about what an enumeration is. So a couple of micro lectures ago, we spoke in detail about constants. We even used it in our code. But one of the situations you run into with constants is that sometimes you need a lot of them. Sometimes the constants match with one another and they need to exist in the same collection. What an enumeration is exactly what it sounds like. It is an array or a collection of constants, which, if so desired, can have a specific numerical value associated with it. So in the first enumeration, season up here, these have numerical values assigned to them by default. And those keys start off at 0. So if I took spring and I reflected season.spring, so season being the enumeration, and I said, okay, I want spring out of that, it'll give me uppercase spring, which is quite interesting because that tells me that that's a constant. But what's interesting is that that corresponds to an integer. Spring would correspond to what integer specifically? Does anybody know? If you want to pause and go look it up, I implore you to do so. What integer would spring correspond to in that enumeration, the season enumeration? Well, to give you the answer, if you've taken the time to pause the video and go look for it, spring would be 0. By default, your enumeration values, the enumeration set, the set in the enumeration, starts at 0 and increments up from 0. So spring is 0, summer is 1, autumn is 2, winter is 3. There are situations where you, as the engineer and the developer, would like to delineate exactly what that numerical value should be. And when you would like to do that, all you have to say is enumeration value equals, and then the integer you would like it to equal. And that's it. That's how enumerations work. Now, let's see if we can put pen to paper and make this a reality in our code. So back to the code we go. And the first thing I want to do is I want to show you what a Boolean actually does. And there's nothing special about a Boolean, all right? Booleans are what they are, true or false, 1 or 0, 1 or 0. And when I say 1 or 0, I literally mean the binary 1 or 0. But there's something interesting here. If I opened up my console, actually, I want to keep that the way it is. If I create a new console, console.writeLine, not log. This isn't JavaScript. There we go. And I asked a question. Does Z equal AA? What do you think the answer is going to be? Well, what I'm actually doing here is I am creating what's called a Boolean expression. And when we start writing if statements and the like, we will create more Boolean expressions that ask a question. Do these match? Do they not match? Are they greater than or equal to each other? So in this case, I will say, do they match? And then I'll ask, do they not match? Let's see what happens. I would argue very strongly that at line 10, we should get false. And at line 11, we should get true. But let's see what REPL has to say about it. And there you go, false and true. Now, these are string representations of the Boolean outcome of these Boolean expressions. You could theoretically create a bool AB, say true. Now, when you write your true or false expression into your code, or if you write a value directly into the Boolean, please understand that it will be the word true or the word false. Those two words are reserved words specifically for bool expressions or Boolean expressions. Those specific words do not need double quotes around them. If you put double quotes around this word, it will error out. Because if you double quote anything, you're basically telling the computer to be that value is a string literal. We don't want that. We want it to be the actual value of true. So let's run this again. Let's see what we get at the bottom. We should get the word true that pops out the bottom here. Now, one other thing I will tell you is everything in computer science, or at least in C# is case sensitive. This can't be uppercase true. That does not exist. There is no such thing as uppercase true. Lowercase true is the answer. The same is true for your variables, your class names, and whatnot. Have a care with your case sensitivity, because if you don't, you can run into some gnarly errors that arise when your computer doesn't like what you're trying to tell it to do. So let's jump into chars. So we'll get rid of, as a matter of fact, let's just get rid of all of this. I think I've had enough of that. Had enough of that. Had enough of that. Okay. So if I want to create a char, it's just as easy as saying char val. Char val is the name of my character. And in this case, I would say A. If I wanted to print this, it would be the same as everything else. Now, what should come out? A. What happens when the character is fed into the console.writeLine method is console.writeLine converts it to a string so it can be printed into your console. And that's that. I don't think there's much else other than talking to you about the char data type and the enumeration data type, or about char specifically. So we have a char here, but I want this character to print on 2 lines. But I don't want to have to deal with, well, actually, let me not say that. Let's just say we have one char that's A, and then char break line, I guess. And I can say this is N. And then I can basically do some string interpolation. All right. So this is console.writeLine. It's going to write everything to 1 line. But what happens when you put the \n char in between the other 2? I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to get a new break line, or break A. They're going to be 2 A's on 2 different lines. At least that's what should happen. If it doesn't, I will build it into a string so it does such. But this should work. There it is. Now you can't see the line break. You can't see that new line character. It won't display it because that backslash basically tells it to not display. It's escaped. You're not supposed to see it, but it still needs to act. And that's what it did. If I removed this new line from this string, then what will happen is it'll print both A's right next to each other. I didn't need that one. And just because I'm not calling the one doesn't mean I have to remove this. I can leave that there. It just won't use it. It's inefficient, but at this point in time, I don't really mind, to be honest. And I had that extra char val there for no reason. I didn't use it, as you saw, and it didn't error out. But this should print AA on one line because I have 0, 0 next to each other with no new line in between them. Great. Now, enumerations. I don't think that I want to get too deep into enumerations because enumerations are their own class. If I wanted to build an enum, I would have to build it outside of this class, right? And then spring, summer, autumn, winter. And then if I wanted to call this enum in my code, I'm going to delete these chars. Let's delete this because I don't know what I'm going to put inside there yet. I can say var spring time equals season dot spring. And then I can say springtime. Now you're probably as curious as I am. What's going to print? Is it going to be the word spring or is it going to be the number 0? I'm going to go off on a limb and say it's about to be the number 0. Because in an enumeration, the key and the value are reversed. The key itself is the name, spring. Value is 0. Now, in this case, it did it backwards, which is totally fine. But I know for a fact, and this is something I don't have to guess about, if I said int and then I said print spring, notice how that's now an int. Notice how that local variable for springtime is an int, where before it wasn't. If I just remove this and just printed season and spring, what's the actual variable going to be? The enum season. This enum, which is a class, if you will, this enum or enumeration creates a data type called season, and it will give me the season that I'm looking for. If I'm saving this to a database, though, I don't want to save all these characters. You know, spring, a lot of characters. What I actually would want to save is the integer, right? And this integer will be 0. And the same thing is true for winter. That integer will be 3. Now, let's say I wanted summer to not be 0 or 1. I wanted it to be 500. Well, now if I said summertime, and I ran this, the value of summer is 500. I am reflecting or casting season.summer to integer. So therefore, I should get the number 500 printed out in my console.writeline, and I do. And that's how enumerations work. Enumerations are used prolifically in C#. We use them all the time because we have a lot of constants all over the place that we need to care for when we save our data based on the keys that we use. Either way, I don't want to belabor the topic. I do want to say that it's been a pleasure and more micro lectures to follow. So as I say in all of my videos, good luck, have fun, ciao.